I said, ain't stepped yet.
And the Grammy goes to All My Love for You, Bobby Rush.
So I went to work in the gym. My job was to get information. When the white guy was sitting around the table in the gym and wanted to bring me all the information.
Bobby Rush was not who you thought he was. He wasn't just a funky bluesman with a wide smile and wild stage moves. Behind the music was a man tangled in a life of chaos. He survived getting shot in a violent altercation, faced jail time, and barely escaped death in a brutal bus crash. The pain didn't stop there. He lost 3 children and his wife, losing almost everything he held dear.
My daughter passed. My 3 sister-in-law passed. Then my next daughter passed. My son passed. Then my wife passed.
On top of that, he was booed in Europe, humiliated in reviews, and ignored by the industry. It took 22 albums to win a Grammy.
But we played behind a curtain every night where the people, white club, where they wanted to hear our music, didn't want to see our face.
Let's delve in. Bobby Rush didn't come from flashing lights or big city dreams. He came from Carquit, Louisiana, a speck on the map so small even locals barely acknowledge it. No stores, no streetlights, just overgrown weeds, loud mosquitoes, and silence. But that's where the blues found him. From that hidden corner of the South, Bobby carved out a life most people wouldn't believe. A career in music that's outlived trends, decades, and half the people who doubted him. Over 70 years in the game. More than 400 songs recorded. Dozens of awards. And after 6 Grammy nominations, he finally won one. At 83 years old. But the gold trophy wasn't the prize. For Bobby, the real win was always the connection. Being heard, being loved, still standing. Music wasn't some rebellious act in his house. His father was a pastor, but not the kind to preach against the blues. He never tried to stop Bobby from playing. And maybe that's because he had a little blues in him too. The music came to Bobby through family first. A cousin with a guitar so sacred nobody touched it. But Bobby found a loophole. Whenever girls came around, that cousin dropped everything.
When I was a young boy, my first cousin gave me a guitar. And I was about 7 years old. He was about 15 years old. He wouldn't let me play the guitar unless the girl was around him.
Bobby started bringing the girls, and each time got a little more time with the guitar. Eventually, it became his, and with it, a future he couldn't yet see.
And I would go out together with the little girls, make him interested in the girls so I could use his guitar.
Even then, his father knew. The guitar was tucked away in the attic, but somehow, Dad always knew. One day he called Bobby down and asked for it. Not to take it away, just to play a song. And what came out of that man? A preacher, a husband, a father. Wasn't gospel.
So my dad being the preacher, he said, boy, bring that guitar here. And I thought my dad was going to sing a song for me, Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, or something from the church.
It was something else, something full of life. That moment didn't need words. It said everything.
But he said, me and my gal went to Chanky Pin hunting. She fell down and I saw something. I said, Daddy, my daddy being a preacher, singing this kind of song? I said, sing it again, Dad.
But Bobby's childhood wasn't just shaped by music. It was shaped by the world's refusal to understand who he was. His father was black, his mother, white. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and striking. But as a kid, none of that registered. To Bobby, she was just his mama.
I never understood, I never knew, and I couldn't divide those lines up between my mother being blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
The world saw her differently, and one day, it made that painfully clear. They were heading to a local store, a spot owned by a white man. Bobby was still small, sitting in the wagon. 2 white men on horseback spotted them and called out to his mother with a slur aimed at his father. She didn't blink. She handled it. But what happened next hit different. She calmly took Bobby from her side and placed him in the back of the wagon. Then she walked into the store alone, playing the role the world expected: a white woman without a black child or a black husband. The switch was seamless, like nothing had happened. Inside, nobody dared question her. She had a name that carried weight in the area. People backed off, and when she walked back outside, she climbed into the wagon like nothing had happened. A few minutes down the road, she called Bobby back to the front, and just like that, she was his mama again.
She set me in the back of the wagon. I didn't know she was putting me in the back of the wagon so she wouldn't be my mother. She went in the store, and when she got in the store, she wasn't this black lady that left me, my mama. She was this white lady when she went in.
He didn't understand it then. He thought she was just mad or acting funny. But years later, it clicked. She wasn't abandoning him. She was protecting him and his father, and maybe even herself. She knew what that moment could have become. So she played the game, changed the script, and saved them all.
I just don't believe my dad was that naive, not knew that she was playing these parts. But whatever she did, she got it done to save my dad's life, my life, and possibly her life.
That's the kind of world Bobby Rush came from. One where survival meant knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to play your part and when to sing your truth. Before Bobby had a band, a guitar, or a stage, he had a mission. One he didn't ask for, but one that shaped everything that came after. Around the age of 11 or 12, Bobby's childhood took a sharp turn. His father, a respected preacher and community man, called him out of school. At first, Bobby thought it was a reward. No more long days in class, no more lessons, just freedom. But he misunderstood the assignment. Leaving school didn't mean playtime. It meant responsibility. His father had other kids to raise, mouths to feed, and decisions to make, and he needed help. So Bobby stepped in, not as a child, but as a partner. That's when he got his first job, not in music, but in something far more unusual. His father sent him down to Mr. Berger's cotton gin, where most folks expected hard labor and dusty paychecks. But Bobby wasn't there to lift or haul. He had a different task.
So I went to work in the gin. My job was to get information. When the white guy was sitting around the table in the gin and wanted to bring me all the information.
He was there to listen. In his overalls, with a rag tucked in his pocket, filled with sand, Bobby moved through the gin like a shadow. When the white landowners sat around the table talking shop, cotton prices, peanut yields, tomato shipments, Bobby hovered just close enough, pretending to clean the floor. He dropped sand near their feet to look busy, all the while soaking in everything they said. Back home, he'd report to his father, who'd sit him down and ask what he heard. Bobby gave him the breakdown like a seasoned informant. Crop forecasts, market changes, what was selling, what was flopping. That intel became Sunday morning sermons, passed on to the farmers and sharecroppers who filled the church pews. What to grow, what to hold, how to make it through another year. Nobody in the congregation knew the source, but Bobby did. Before he was a bluesman, he was a boy playing a grown man's game, learning how to navigate a world built on secrets, power, and survival. The cotton gin became his first classroom, not one with books or blackboards, but with whispers and deals and information that could mean the difference between profit and poverty.
I went a lot of places I could not go where you had to club. I played a many clubs that no color allowed because I was there because of musician standpoint.
After Bobby watched his mother disappear into that store alone, pretending like she didn't have a son in the wagon or a black man waiting outside, something changed in him. He didn't have the words for it then, but the world had spoken loud and clear. It wasn't going to make room for boys like him, not easily. So he carved one out for himself. In 1947, he left Louisiana with his father and landed in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Still just a kid, but already chasing something. Music had always lived in his bones, and in Arkansas, he gave it shape, forming his first band, Bobby Rush and the Four Jivers. One of his earliest bandmates was Elmo James, a name that would go on to mean something in the world of blues. At the time, they were just young, hungry, and playing whatever rooms would have them. But Bobby's eyes were already set beyond Arkansas. He dreamed of Chicago, the city where the blues lived loudest. The problem? That dream cost about $11 in bus fare. And Bobby didn't have $11. What he did have was just enough for a ride to Memphis. So he went.
I left my little hometown in Louisiana in 1947. I went to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. In 1951, I moved to Chicago.
Memphis was its own kind of magic. Beale Street was buzzing with music and people who were just like him, trying to make something out of nothing. Rufus Thomas was there, B.B. King, Sonny Boy, Williamson. Bobby played wherever he could, sometimes tap dancing, sometimes strumming his little guitar, for $3 a night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Eventually, he had enough saved to keep moving. Next stop, East St. Louis. The stakes were higher there, so were the names. Chuck Berry, Albert King. Bobby kept hustling, playing for scraps, working for pennies, until he finally had what he needed to chase his real goal, Chicago. By 1951, Bobby was in the city he dreamed about. It was colder, rougher, bigger, but it was also the heart of the blues. Everywhere you turned, someone legendary was in the room. Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter, Jimmy Reed. Bobby threw himself into it head first. Soon, he was introduced to J.B. Lenoir, who tossed him his first real gig in town, a club in Blue Island.
They said, "This is J.B. Lenoir. He got a job for you." I said, "Wow." He said, "Suburb Chicago in Blue Island." So he took me to Blue Island where he got me a job.
Bobby and his band took it, excited by the pay and the possibilities. $7.50 a night, then $15. Eventually, they were even backing Muddy Waters once a week.
Me and the band making $7.50 a night. Me and the band. And I finally got a raise for $15 a night, me and the band. And I hired Muddy Waters every Wednesday night for $5.50.
But the thrill wore off fast. The club was white-owned. The crowd was white. And though they loved the music, they didn't want to see the musicians. Bobby and his band had to play behind a curtain, hidden like they were something to be ashamed of. It felt like he'd escaped the Jim Crow South just to find a more subtle version of it in the North.
We played behind a curtain every night where the people, white club, where they wanted to hear our music, didn't want to see our face.
The first time he showed up at the club early, the truth hit him hard. The place was empty, not even open, but the owner told him to come through the back. That's when he saw it. They were putting up a special curtain just for him. They wanted his sound, but not his face.
I played at many places behind a curtain. Well, they wanted to hear my music, didn't want to see my face. Oh yeah.
He was the first black artist ever hired there, and for that privilege, he had to perform like a ghost. Night after night, the music poured through the speakers while Bobby and his band stayed out of sight. Then, one night, the curtain opened for a split second, just enough time for him to take a bow, and for the audience to boo. The curtain dropped just as fast. Eventually, the owner tried something new. 2 curtains, one to hide the band, another to reveal only Bobby. His face was now acceptable, barely, but his band? Still out of sight.
Just me, but they didn't want to see the black band.
So yeah, that
broke my heart, Dave. It broke my heart.
The music had broken through. The man behind it hadn't. It was a win on paper. The crowd cheered. The money came in. But something inside Bobby cracked. He saw it for what it was. Acceptance, but only on their terms. They didn't mind the sound. They just didn't want to see the people making it. Bobby got shot in the stomach when he was young. This wasn't some street brawl. It happened while he was working on a plantation. According to him, it started with a run-in with a white man, and the situation turned violent fast. He's never shared all the details, but the way he puts it, it was one of those moments where being black in the South meant you were already at a disadvantage. He almost didn't make it out alive. That wasn't the only time the system tried to break him. He says he was jailed early on, not for doing anything wrong, but just for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. No charges, no trial, just Mississippi in the Jim Crow era. Back then, locking up young black men was more about power than justice. For Bobby, the blues wasn't just music. It was how he stayed sane, how he stayed alive. Bobby's story isn't just a tale of music and stages. Long before the Grammys and the Accolades, Bobby built a life rooted in love, family, and responsibility. He married young, stepping into a role that came with more than just a wife. Her 3 younger sisters were still children themselves. So young, they mistook him for their father. And when Bobby's own kids came along, they grew up thinking those girls were their siblings, not knowing they were actually their aunts. It was a tight, tangled family, full of warmth and laughter. But the years ahead would test him in ways he couldn't have imagined. The losses didn't come all at once, but they came relentlessly.
I think the tragedy made me stronger because I had to find some way to hold on, or to hold on to.
First, he buried a daughter. Then, one by one, the girls he'd helped raise, his sister-in-laws, passed away. Then came another daughter. Then his only son. And finally, the woman who had started it all with him, his wife.
My daughter passed. My 3 sister-in-law passed. Then my next daughter passed. My son passed. Then my wife passed.
In time, every single person from that first chapter of his life was gone. The family he had loved, raised, and protected had slowly disappeared, leaving him standing in a silence that no applause could fill. Eventually, he remarried and had another son, a small light in the aftermath of so much darkness. But that long stretch of grief had already carved its mark into him, the kind of pain that doesn't announce itself, but lives in the quiet moments, in the empty chairs, in the birthdays that stop coming. Somehow, Bobby kept moving. He didn't know how. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was because stopping would have meant breaking. Whatever it was, he held on. To the music, to the memory, to whatever scraps of strength he could find. He'd been through too much to fall apart now. So he kept going. Not because he didn't feel the weight, but because he'd learned to carry it.
I think I got my strength from losing. Yeah, I had to find a way to dust myself off and get up. I don't know where it come from.
Let's talk about the career this bluesman has had. Bobby wasn't even grown when he started sneaking into clubs with a fake mustache, just trying to blend in with the grown folks and catch some of that live wire energy coming off the crowd. He was hooked. Then his whole family packed up and moved to Chicago, which turned out to be a jackpot move, because that's where the blues scene was really cooking. He ended up hanging with legends like Little Walter and Muddy Waters, literally had them as neighbors. Little Walter even got him a gig at a spot called Skins, where they had to play behind a curtain so the white crowd wouldn't see who was really making the music. Messed up? Absolutely. But that's how things were back then. From there, Bobby started rolling with big names like Etta James,
When I saw you,
Howlin' Wolf,
coming out the window,
and Jimmy Reed.
you had to hear me when I called.
Grinding it out on the circuit and soaking it all in. Then came his game changer, Chicken Heads, a funky little track that started out on a tiny label, but once it got picked up, it took off. It didn't just chart, it hit and hard. That was the moment everyone started really paying attention. And years later, when the song popped up in Black Snake Moan, it made a comeback and landed right back on the charts like it never left. That song wasn't just a hit, it became his signature move. At one point, Bobby linked up with Philly International, one of those labels where, if you were black and making music, that's where you wanted to be. He dropped his first official album, Rush Hour, with Leon Huff behind the boards. One of the tracks, I Wanna Do the Do, made a quiet appearance on the charts. Not exactly a smash, but enough to raise eyebrows. Critics had mixed feelings. Some thought it was fun and funky. Others were just confused by songs about lost keys and awkward protest tracks. Either way, Bobby was doing Bobby. Then came Sue,
Maybe just a little bit more. She's a good one.
and Ain't Studdin' Ya.
Hear what I said? I said, ain't studying ya.
Both went gold, showing everyone he wasn't some one-hit memory from the 70s. He kept dropping music and growing his fan base without ever switching up to chase trends. After nearly 5 decades in Chicago, he packed up and headed to Jackson, Mississippi. It wasn't just a move, it was personal. He wanted to get closer to where his family's story started. Back to the South, back to the soil. That new chapter sparked another wave. He started recording for labels like La Jam and Waldoxy, and eventually launched his own thing, Deep Rush, with a former Malaco exec as his partner. It wasn't just about pushing his own music anymore. He started shining a light on other talent too, like Dexter Allen, a Mississippi local and one of his old bandmates. Bobby wasn't slowing down. He was building something. Bobby circled back to his roots with folk funk, dropping a raw, grittier sound that brought back the dirt and soul, with guitarist Alvin Youngblood Hart jumping in for the ride. Around that same time, he was also lifting up indie artists as a judge for the Independent Music Awards, putting in work behind the scenes, not just on stage. Oh, and Bobby wasn't just killing it at clubs. He made it all the way to the White House, performed alongside James Brown when Bill Clinton first stepped in, then popped up again years later to perform for Bill and Hillary in Arkansas. When it came to stages, no matter how big or small, Bobby knew how to show up. And just when people thought he'd seen it all, he went and made history in China. First blues artist to ever perform there. That moment earned him a fancy nickname and even a gig as a friendship ambassador to the Great Wall after shutting down the biggest concert that space had ever seen. Bobby was still stacking wins. Down in Louisiana got him a Grammy nod and even snagged him a Blues Music Award for Best Soul Blues Album. That same year, he racked up more nominations. Clearly, folks were finally catching up to what he'd been doing all along, and he didn't slow down. The very next year, Decisions got him another Grammy nomination, this time with Blind Dog Smokin' and the one and only Dr. John jumping on the project. Then came his moment on The Tonight Show. Bobby hit the stage with Dan Aykroyd and they tore into a James Brown classic like it was nobody's business. It was the kind of performance that reminded everyone just how seasoned Bobby really was. He popped up in the documentary I Am the Blues not long after, basically cementing his place as part of the genre's living history. And just to keep things fresh, he showed up in Dolomite Is My Name, playing himself, guitar in hand, giving the crowd I Ain't Studdin' You like it was still day one.
And the Grammy goes to All My Love for You, Bobby Rush.
It took 22 albums, but Bobby finally started getting the kind of credit he'd earned 10 times over. When Rush dropped, it came with awards. He was named Best Male Soul Blues Artist, and his stripped-down project Raw brought in more wins for Best Acoustic Artist and Best Acoustic Album. By then, his name was everywhere. Hall of Fame here, Hall of Fame there. First the Blues Hall of Fame, then the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame, and even his own spot on the Mississippi Blues Trail, right there in Jackson. They even had him cut the ribbon when the Blues Hall of Fame opened its doors, with TV cameras rolling, and Memphis giving him his flowers loud and proud. But it wasn't just plaques and titles. The wins kept stacking. In one stretch, he bagged 2 major blues music awards, including the B.B. King Entertainer of the Year. Then, he hit a different kind of stage, Rhodes College, where they gave him an honorary doctorate and premiered his bluesy twist on America the Beautiful. The man went from juke joints to college gowns. Porcupine Meat, yes, that's the actual name, ended up being a full-circle moment. That album didn't just turn heads, it finally got him his first Grammy. He was 83 and still outworking half the game. That same year, Chickenheads got the tribute treatment with a 50-year compilation that won big, too. Even the EDM kids got in on the Bobby Rush energy. SMLE's remix of his track Funk O.D. Funk landed a Grammy nom in the remix category. It didn't win, but the fact that a blues legend had tracks being flipped in electronic music circles, that said everything. Before TikTok had twerking, Bobby Rush had shake dancers, the original blueprint. Rappers love him for a reason. He's quick with the wordplay and always knew how to work a crowd. Over time, though, he stripped it all down. By 2019, his shows had just one dancer. By 2022, it was just him, a guitar, and that killer harmonica. No frills, just blues, raw and alive. Even on Zoom, the man's a firecracker. Singing, playing, joking, no stage needed. At 88, he's still a burst of energy wrapped in soul and pride. COVID nearly took him out. 5 weeks in the hospital, first in Mississippi, to catch it. But he bounced back, crediting clean living and God's grace. Then went straight to his studio and got to work. He's been called the king of the Chitlin circuit and the funkiest man alive. And he lives up to it. Pandemic or not, Bobby Rush doesn't stop.